Clearly, it did not stick with me long enough for me to even remember to tell you guys what it is, so I obviously have little to no interest in reading it. Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing the anti-TBR tag. I know this tag was pretty popular a while ago, at least a few years ago I started seeing it come up, a lot of people were doing it. I've never done it, but I thought it'd be interesting to share with you guys some of the books I definitely don't ever want to read. There are a lot of books I really want to read, and there are also a lot of books I really don't ever want to read. And this is the tag that answers pretty much all those questions. Before I start, I do want to say that if I mention your favorite author or your favorite book, I'm sorry. You are perfectly entitled to your opinion. They might just not be for me, and that's perfectly fine. We can still enjoy reading and books in general. We just might not enjoy the same books and authors, and if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. I'm sorry in advance if I mention your favorite book or favorite author. It's not an attack against you. Those are just my personal feelings. There are 8 questions to the tag, and I will have them all written out in the description down below if you want to play along or if you want to do the tag yourself. Question number 1 is a popular book everyone else seems to love but you have no interest in reading. I could cite a lot of books for this. Twilight, Harry Potter, Crescent City. There's a lot of stuff out there that I'm just not that into reading. I know I had a specific answer, but I kind of forgot it right before I hit record, and then I stopped recording and I still can't remember what it is, so I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know those are a few books that I've just never really had an interest in getting to. It kind of bugs me that I don't remember what my actual answer was. The fact that I don't think I'm going to be able to remember it means I kind of have to move on from this question, but clearly it did not stick with me long enough for me to even remember to tell you guys what it is, so I obviously have little to no interest in reading it. Question number 2 is a classic book or author you have no interest in reading. It took me a little while to think of one because there are classics out there that I might not be the most interested in but would be willing to give a shot at some point. So I did a quick Google search, and I know I would never ever want to read Lord of the Flies or Catcher in the Rye. I'm pretty sure that's the one that has Holden Caulfield in it. I have no interest in reading because I've heard terrible, terrible things about that book, and why would I want to subject myself to that? So nope, never gonna read that. Question number 3, a problematic author whose books you have no interest in reading. Gonna start this off by saying J.K. Rowling. Yeah, she's a problematic author now, and I can put her on this list. I have no interest in reading Harry Potter. I didn't have an interest in reading Harry Potter before that, and it's a series I've never read. With a lot of the things that J.K. Rowling has said recently about the LGBTQ community, specifically the trans community, she's just not an author whose work I want to support, and I have no interest in reading Harry Potter. I know that I missed the bandwagon, and that's one of the reasons why it's easy for me to say this, but I understand why a lot of people really enjoyed her books, but they just never appealed to me in general, so really, I don't think I'm missing out on much. Another person whose books I have no interest in reading, who is problematic, is Colleen Hoover. I've heard a lot of stuff about how her romances are actually very abusive and how a lot of them involve cheating, and I am just not for that. I don't like the kind of romances she writes. I don't generally like romance in general or new adult. She's just one of those authors who, once I heard about the stuff that she was writing about, I didn't really have an interest in picking up her books. Not that I really had an interest in that before, but it made me reevaluate why people liked her so much, and so I don't think I could ever pick up one of her books. Question number 4. An author you picked up a few books from and decided they are not for you. The first one that comes to mind is Sarah J. Maas. I read the first 5 books in the Throne of Glass series, and I just decided I didn't like it anymore. I wasn't a fan of her writing style anymore. I wasn't a fan of the way she wrote her male characters. I'm just not really a fan of her work anymore. I was when I first started the series, and I think I was really into that, but honestly, once Rowan came into the books, it just kind of went really downhill for me, which I know is also an unpopular opinion, not liking Rowan. I just don't like him. I could sit here for a really long time explaining why I don't like him, but that would be a whole other video, and that would take me at least an hour. I have no doubt that Sarah J. Maas is a good writer, and I've heard really good things about her most recent release, Crescent City, but after thinking about it for a really long time, I just don't think her books are for me, and the same goes for Cassandra Clare. I read the first 2 books in the Mortal Instruments series. Despite the fact that I read the books pretty quickly, I just couldn't get into the characters, I couldn't get into the story. At the point in which I read them, there were already like 14 books out, and I really didn't feel like reading through all those books just to get to wherever it was in the series that I had to be at that point. There's so many books and I don't want to read through them. The most I might do, and this is like a really tentative might, is to pick up the Infernal Devices. I've heard that those are really good and stand apart from the other books really well. Maybe if I'm curious about revisiting it, I'll go and read that, but honestly, angsty love triangles and angels and demons aren't really my thing. So Sarah J. Maas and Cassandra Clare are the two authors I'm picking for this question. I know it's technically kind of like a booktube sin or like a book lover sin. Like it's okay, not a sin, but it's a very unpopular opinion in the community not to like either one of them. I don't really have an explanation for you. Question number 5. A genre you have no interest in or a genre you tried to get into but just couldn't. For me, this is war fiction. I am fine with books that are historical fiction set during war times, but books specifically about war or people fighting in the war or going to war, I don't get it. I don't like it. My dad really likes them. He reads a lot of Tom Clancy, and that's a lot of like spy and war stuff. I just can't get into it, which I think is really interesting because for someone who enjoys strategy so much, I don't like reading about people working on war strategy. Or no, that's not really why I don't like it. I just can't get into the stories. I'm not really interested in reading about people being on the battlefront and fighting for a really long time because I don't really understand what the point of those plots are. If it's about an actual war in the past and about someone who actually fought in a war, I'd read that. But if it's a fictional war and about people who are just fighting it and there's not really much point to it, I don't really get war fiction. I don't even think I'm doing a good job of explaining it. So if I did butcher the genre, I'm sorry. I don't really know what it is, and I don't think I ever want to, and I don't think I can ever get into it. Question number 6. A book you bought but will never read. I actually have this in physical form because I bought it. On Writing by Stephen King. I bought this because I really wanted to read more about writing craft, and I know that a lot of people rave about this book. And then I read one of his books. I read The Green Mile, and I just wasn't a fan of it. And the more I've looked into his stuff and the more that I've thought about his writing in general, I just don't really think he's that great of a writer. I think he's kind of overhyped. Granted, I'm saying that having only read one of his books. I don't feel like I'm ever going to read any more of them. This is the book I'm least likely to read, honestly, off my entire shelf. I have it technically on my TBR to read, I think for this year or something, but I'm just not all that interested in reading it because this isn't even technically a how-to or like a betterment of writing or like a Save the Cat style book of how to improve your writing. This is just kind of him reflecting on his own writing experience, and if anything, I'll read it for that, but I'm probably going to DNF this even if I read it, so I'm very unlikely to actually pick this up off my shelf now that I know I don't really like Stephen King or his writing style. Might be different with nonfiction, but I'm not going to guarantee that I'll ever get to this book. Also, apologies for the sirens. Question number 7. A series you have no interest in reading or one that you started and DNF'd. I actually started and DNF'd the Shadow and Bone trilogy. I DNF'd the last book. Wasn't really interested in that. I've read the first 3 books in the Red Rising series and I'm not going to continue in that. I am obviously not going to continue in the Thread of Glass series. I DNF'd that. I've DNF'd the Mortal Instruments series. I know that there are other series. I DNF'd the Maze Runner series because I read the original trilogy and then I read the prequel and then there's apparently another book and I just don't want to read those books anymore. Now that Ready Player One is a duology, I have no interest in picking up Ready Player 2 because I don't really like Ready Player 1 all that much. Does Twilight still count? Can I answer Twilight for this? I'm never gonna read Twilight just because not something I would be interested in. Not my thing, would never read it. I'm sure there are plenty of other series out there that I would never read, but these are the ones that come to my mind immediately. So yeah, that's just a bunch that I would never read or have already DNF. And for the 8th and last question, a new release you have absolutely no interest in reading. I already mentioned Crescent City, but that's technically not a new release anymore. Can I still say Crescent City? That's one. I'm thinking of books that came out last year. I'm really bad with staying up to date on new releases, so there's a lot of them that I feel like just kind of go over my head and I don't even know that they're coming out, so that means I don't really have an interest in picking them up because I obviously don't even know they're coming out. But the ones I can think of are the next Cassandra Clare book that's coming out. It's technically not even out yet, but it's gonna be a new release and I have no interest in reading that. There's a new Sarah J Maas book coming out too from the Akatar series, I think. I don't even know anymore. Not interested in reading that either, clearly because I'm not gonna follow her books anymore. I'm just gonna do a really quick search on Google and see what's come out recently that I don't have an interest in reading. Give me a second. Okay, I did a quick search on Goodreads and a new release that I have no interest in reading is The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I have already heard some mixed reviews on this. I know it came out pretty recently. I think it came out in January or like at the beginning of February. People have talked about it. Basically the premise is kind of that two people pretend to be exes and have a radio show or podcast or something, but they're not actually exes, they're just complete strangers, and eventually at some point they fall in love or something like that. Yeah, I clearly don't know the premise and I really have no interest in reading it. It's a romance. I don't really read romances in general, and if I do, this is not likely to be the kind of romance I would pick up. So yeah, that's a new release that I have no interest in reading. I feel like I could have been a lot more specific or clearer about a lot of these questions, but the truth is that I have been so out of what is popular in the book community and what is coming out in the book community that there's a lot of these questions I just can't answer, and if I'm not going to read a book, chances are I'm not likely to remember it. So as I was going through these questions, I kind of realized I was setting myself up for a little bit of failure because of how out of touch I am with this book community. Do I think I did a passable job? Yeah, you know a little bit more about my reading taste now. But other than that, I feel like I mostly just talked about how I don't really have much interest in reading Sarah J Maas or Cassandra Clare. Thank you for watching this jumbled mess of a tag. I want to know what's a popular book you have zero interest in reading, and I will see you guys in a new video next Saturday. Bye!